All right. Let me make sure. Hello. Hello, those of you who are joining us. It's nice to see you. All right. We'll be joined shortly with author Sarah Frier. Hi. Oh, this is so fun. I can see you all joining. All right. For those of you who are tuning in now, journalist Sarah Frier will be joining us in a moment, and then you will hear all about Instagram from her. A hot second. Yay!
Hey, it worked. I was clicking on the wrong live video. So I'm here now. Hi, guys.
Oh, hi everyone. Hi Sarah. I like the backdrop that you have.
Yeah, this curtain behind me. Yes, very exciting.
Okay, well, people are starting to tune in. Hi Mira. Hi everyone.
Hi,
Um,
guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we have here journalist Sarah Frier, who is behind some of the stories behind some of your favorite companies like Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And she recently published her first and new book, No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram. So we're going to spend about the next 20 or so odd minutes, like chat. I've got a couple of questions for you. And then if you have questions yourselves, feel free to drop them into the comment section and we'll try to spend the last 10 minutes or so answering them. Great. Um, well, Sarah, it's good to see you. Where in the world are you
Good
right
to
now?
see you too. I'm in San Francisco.
Amazing. I think a bunch of people are joining also from the West Coast and East. The nice thing about remote is we're all joining from different places. Um, I kind of wanted to kick it off with you've been covering social media for a decade now, right? And so, of all the companies and all the things that you could have covered, what were the kinds of questions that you really wanted to answer by writing this book?
Well, the thing about the Instagram story is this is a company that has not only affected our behavior on the internet, but also off the internet. And the way that we decide what to buy, where to go, how to interact with our friends, what to do when we're out and about. We really think about Instagram as we go about our days, or at least people who use this product heavily do. And so I thought that that was a really interesting question. How did a product end up having such a hold on our behavior and our culture? And how do you do that as a company? It's like build that relevance in people's lives. And so it started out with that question. And then as I started digging into the story, I realized that there was a very deep fabric of tension within Facebook and Instagram's relationship, and interesting stories about competition between Instagram and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, and inside stories of how Instagram behind the scenes built its rapport with celebrities and with influencers who rose to fame on the app. So to me, it really started to piece together something that was more than just a beat or something to dig in as a reporter, but possibly a whole book. And I'm glad to share that story with you now.
Yeah, and I will admit I got the book and read the whole thing in like 2.5 days. It was like it's very compelling. And I realize I feel a little bit like Ellen DeGeneres when we're on TV, for people who are newer and tuning in now, I'm Min. I'm an investor at Bloomberg Beta, and we're lucky to have known Sarah through like the broader Bloomberg family for many years now. And so she's with us today to talk about her new book, No Filter. And I just asked her like what was the impetus for starting writing this book. And so if you're newer to the feed, is this also your first IG live or how other ways that you
Actually, like many other folks, I have been going live more often on Instagram. I feel like it's a phenomenon of our COVID stay-at-home
Mhm.
life is that people are using Instagram in a really different way. And all of those things I just talked about how it's changed the way we travel, to change the way we go to restaurants. Like now we're stuck at home and we're going live. I went live with Simon Schuster last week. I'm going to go live with Matthew Kovac tomorrow. So I'm
Yeah.
getting into it and learning about this product. If it were an alternate reality, we would be at Bloomberg Beta HQ where we're going to have a party tonight. But I'm so glad that I can still see all of you.
Same, but we're partying here on the interwebs. And so I am curious, like, one of the things that's really striking about the book, and it's only been about a week since it's been published, right? And so if you haven't yet read it, it's available on Amazon and wherever else you can really buy books today. And it's super character driven in a way that is a little atypical, I think, of a traditional like tech story, right? It is less about like the here's what I mean, definitely includes the plot lines of how Instagram was born in like 2010 and then kind of grew into this like really influential social app and then it ultimately got acquired by Facebook. But kind of coming at it with your like writer lens on, I really wanted to hear from you on like why you wrote the book in this way that actually tells the story, I think, of like Kevin and Mike.
Well, I think as a reporter trying to break news at Bloomberg, what I've always been asking is like what's going to happen next and why. And this book was more about answering the question, how did that happen that way? And what were the motivations that led to it? Like what's the whole story arc? So it's a different way of reporting. And I found that I wanted to do it in a way that helped people relate to these characters and brought them into the room and adhered to, of course, to what people had told me in interviews, but I didn't want it to be written like an article where you have so and so being quoted saying something from the present tense about what happened in the past tense. I thought that that would bring people out of the moment. And I really wanted people when they were reading to be in the scene, to understand these people as humans, understand their motivations, understand their challenges at an emotional level as they're trying to deal with all of the responsibility, all of the fast growth, all of the competition and the egos clashing in the story. And so it seemed like a natural way to tell it. And I know that that's the way Mike Isaac's book Super Pumped is written. That's the way Nick Bilton's book Hatching Twitter is written. It's just like this scene-based narrative.
Totally. And I think that it does make for like an extremely compelling read. And it's like kind of meta because I found it, Instagram is all about like the way the founders intended it. It's that it's like a window into people's lives. And I feel like you did that by like reversing the camera and saying like this is like their story and like Instagram story. And so now as like users, we understand like what and why we're using Instagram the way we do.
I wanted to also make it different than those books, though, in telling not just the story of the internal boardroom drama, but also how those decisions end up affecting us and what we choose to value and how we choose to live and what about the product succeeds and who it makes famous. So I think that in that way, it's slightly different than you would normally see in a business book.
Yeah, totally. Um, and for everyone, if you want to drop in your comments and questions, like feel free to do so in the chat. I've got a couple more questions for Sarah, and then I'd love to dig into some other ones that you and the audience have. So there's like kind of what you're saying, right? Like you do get a little, it lends into the internal drama and dynamics and the people, and it's got like this story actually has a star-studded Silicon Valley cast that I personally even didn't know some of the intertwining relationships of how like Kevin's sister interned for Jack Dorsey. Like I didn't know that detail, right? And that's actually how they knew each other, and that's how the Twitter, Instagram worlds collided at some point in their like histories. And so for you, like what, if any, were surprising relationships or insights that you learned as you were researching for the book?
I think one of the most, so there were all of those surprise at the very beginning. You see, like Jack Dorsey is an early investor of Instagram. You see him heartbroken when Instagram sells to Facebook instead of Twitter. You see Mark Zuckerberg trying to hire Kevin Systrom back in 2005, back
Mm-hmm.
when Facebook was still like run out of a house in Palo Alto, and it was
It was like
called the Facebook.com. So it's really crazy to see how small this world is. And it also helps you understand how different Kevin Systrom was than the other people he was running into in Silicon Valley, because there was this hacker mentality. I got a call. There was this hacker mentality and this sense of uh, the best way to build products is to solve really hard technical problems and do it in a really impressive way. And Systrom didn't have an engineering background. He didn't have a programming back. He did have an engineering background, but he was not a computer programmer. And when he was seeing all of this hacking of apps and software, for him it was more interesting, like, how are people going to use this in their lives? He was a very social person. He was a DJ. He was a photographer. He was a latte artist. He could make a leaf pattern and latte photo. I mean, he was just he was obsessed with bourbon. He loved nice music. Like, he had these passions beyond just technology. And I think that helped him understand how to build something that appeals more broadly.
And do you feel like that kind of like his that actually makes him kind of unique in terms of like being the prototypical Silicon Valley founder, right? In terms of he wasn't a computer science major. He did go to Stanford, but and I guess when you think about like the founders today who are thinking about building something new and next, right? Like in your experience of getting to know Silicon Valley, do you feel like that has changed in terms of like who sees themselves as being able to found a company and like who can like succeed?
Well, I think one of the lessons of the story is, do you build a company based on what you're hearing from people or what you're hearing from the data? And Instagram was all about getting feedback from users, building relationships with users who could then tell the story of the product through their own content and their own success. And Facebook was much more about looking at the data and saying, well, if it's trending in this direction, we must be doing something right. If it's trending in that direction, we must be doing something wrong. And you kind of need both. I mean, eventually you need both. But in the beginning, it helped Instagram that they had this relationships focus, that when they started out their app, they focused on what problem are we trying to solve for people and who should we have use this product to demonstrate the problem being solved. So they reached out to people who had big followings on Twitter. They reached out to artists. They reached out to creatives and people who they thought would be good at Instagram. And
Yeah,
that's it's a weird concept because you don't think about being good at Facebook or being good. It's not something like that we have really thought about in terms of social media. It seems like ultra democratic and neutral. In fact, none of these products are neutral. Like, Facebook has biases in how it designs its algorithms. Twitter has biases in terms of how things go viral. They all have this mix of like human involvement and algorithmic involvement. And it's important to understand when we're trying to look at the factors that led Instagram to where it is today, the product decisions, but also the decisions around relationships.
totally. Yeah. And like in terms of and that kind of brings me to I guess like the next phase of Facebook of Instagram, which was like post acquisition, right? And then it became this uh like this,
Tension, yeah.
right? Like, and there's this like really great line in the book about how Mark Zuckerberg is super paranoid about other products that compete with Facebook, and how if we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, then somebody else will, right? And so that was like a lot of his rationale for looking at companies like Instagram, and then he also looked at other like WhatsApp and Snapchat, and some of those definitely became a part of Facebook, and others didn't. And for you, like if you were to think about or share, like what do you think are the lessons that like founders can learn or like people in the tech community can learn about uh, the power of like a tech M&A, I guess? What would you think about for them?
So I think that the Instagram story teaches us about the ego and vision of a founder, right? Kevin would not have sold his company to Facebook unless Zuckerberg told him that he could keep it independent. And there's this aura around founders, as you know, like they have, this is their baby, they've built it up, they don't want to let go of it, and an acquisition is always thought of as like giving up. And I think Kevin smartly realized that giving it to Facebook wouldn't be giving up the project, that it would actually probably help accelerate Instagram's growth. What he didn't realize is that there's no way, if Zuckerberg tells you you're going to remain independent, eventually that's not going to last. So if you sell your company, you sell your company. And I think that there, even though for so long we heard this rosy story of Instagram's position within Facebook and how they were able to thrive on their own and have a completely separate brand and a separate identity, there were signs from the very beginning that Facebook had a different opinion. In fact, when Instagram first joined Facebook, the growth team looked at Instagram and said, you know, we would love to help you grow, but first we have to figure out if Instagram is going to lead to people posting fewer photos on Facebook.
Right.
Once we conclude that you are not a threat to us, so they spend $1 billion on something, which ends up being 715 million because of the decline of the stock price. But they end up offering $1 billion for something that then they are willing to like not help thrive,
Right.
if it's going to compete with Facebook. And that theme comes up later in the book,
Mm-hmm.
when, of course, there is a concern about Instagram cannibalizing Facebook to the point that Zuckerberg starts restricting its resources. He starts reducing the amount they can hire and making sure that Instagram more tightly integrates with Facebook and starts directing people from Instagram to Facebook.
Right. Which is like so
And
interesting.
yeah.
Highlights the influence of Instagram in like a reverse psychological way, right? Because the only reason he felt that way was because it's Instagram was rising in like influence and popularity and usage so much more. Um, and for you, like how like Instagram is so influential and like more of a phenomenon than anything, right? Like restaurants and other places become destinations because they become like Instagram worthy. And like for you, how has like your life, if at all, been changed by because of your like use of Instagram?
Well, it's useful as a reporter because you can get in contact with anybody. But I also think like I've used it when I decide what restaurants to go to or when I decide where to travel. Back when we used to travel and go to restaurants, that was something I would look at the pictures and I would find that my own purchase behavior was in part determined by how good something looks.
Yeah.
And if you go to a restaurant, like the food that's prettier somehow tastes better. It's just an incredible phenomenon. But maybe that's also because we love to take pictures of what we're doing and in presenting them on Instagram, build an identity, build a sense of how we want the world to see us. And I think that, you know, for people building products today, it's important to think about the incentives and the structures within your product for the people who use it. So Instagram doesn't have resharing. So you can't put anything on your profile that someone else, you can't just like, stuff doesn't go viral on Instagram. Um, the good part of that is you don't get the same viral sort of candy that you see on other sites, what things that are meant to make you upset or emotional or happy or just something that is designed to be shared. You don't see that as much on Instagram. Instead of content going viral, people get famous. And their Instagram account becomes the purest representation of who they are and what they're trying to build in terms of a brand, in terms of a lifestyle, and
Yeah.
everything they do kind of fits into that narrative that they're bringing out to the world.
Yeah.
And when the founders decided not to do resharing, they weren't thinking about that ultimate consequence at all. They were just thinking, well, if photographers and artists are using this thing, they probably don't want people to share their work without credit. And they were thinking about other aspects of it and like the damage that viral content can do. But then you have this other consequence that you're not really thinking about when you make that decision that has really affected Instagram's role in our society.
Right. And I think it's like they did make some really counterintuitive choices. Like even after they stepped away from like serving like the primary photographers and designers, like one of their core values was that sense of beauty and aesthetic, and like they didn't want it to be like splashed with ads, right? Like even when they started thinking about monetization, they wanted to do it like very intentionally and like kind of have that like authentic. Like they kind of reinvented the word of like what authentic, right? Like even
Authenticity is now a word that means you can't tell if someone's trying to sell to you.
right, kind of different like
Yeah.
version of like native advertising, right? And uh, yeah, I just like that's like such a powerful thing that I think Instagram created for us. Um, so we're getting like a couple questions, and before we switch gears, I want to do a little bit of like asking Sarah, the writer and the journalist. And so for, like, how do you fall into covering social media?
I I really thought that it was just an interesting thing that it was affecting not just interesting from a business perspective. So I think that as tech reporters, we used to just cover things from the perspective of is it growing? Are they figuring out this transition to mobile? But social media, the reason I've stayed on the beat so long is because I really think that it's changing every year as these companies become more powerful. Covering them is almost like covering a government, like a global government that makes rules about how we behave and how we get informed and how we organize and what we decide to do. Um, that has been really fascinating to me. And I think that the more people asking questions and hoping for transparency from these products, the better, because there's so much that I discovered just through this book about the decisions that Instagram made and why they made them and the motivations and the clashes that led to the factors that are now affecting how we use the product. Um, I want to keep asking questions like that. I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, and is there like is there a particular company or any particular type of conversation that's going on right now where you're like, oh yes, like that is actually how big tech companies should be thinking about their reach and influence?
Well, I think that a lot of companies right now are very caught up in like the mission-based narrative, and they don't really admit that often what they're trying to do is more for their business than for the people they're serving. And so whenever you see, like when as a reporter, see a divergence between like what a company says it's doing or what they say their motivation is versus what they're actually doing and the actual effect, like there are many times where Facebook presents itself almost like it's an NGO or like it's a benevolent public service instead of a company that's trying to make money. And I think that if people understand the if companies were a little bit more honest about what they're trying to do, I think people would just trust them more.
Mm, that's the hope. Yeah, like that transparency. I mean, that's like a core value of
Yeah,
how it operates too. And so I feel like the hope is that the more open and honest you can be, that people will see that and like
yeah.
appreciate the decision making. Right. Yeah. Okay, so a timely question would be, so right now there's like a crisis going on in the world and it's like unprecedented. But you also started your journalism career at the like as the we were coming out of the last financial crisis, right? And so if you were to talk like for aspiring writers out in the room, or other out, like what kind of advice, if at all, would you give them?
I think the most important thing when there's a scarcity of jobs is to try to stand out by providing something that no one else can provide. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to like invent something new. It's just about, at least in journalism, breaking news or understanding how to develop sources so that you can add something new to the equation. But it's not just breaking news. I mean, other journalists have been able to build their careers off having really interesting opinions. It's just about having something to offer that nobody else can, or even if there are other people who offer it, there's a scarcity of people who are offering it at that quality. And if you can do that, it's really tough to lose a job. It's really tough to find a job right now. Um, but there are ways to at least be optimistic that if you are providing something fresh, then people will want it.
Yeah, and to be fair, you've like now covered this beat for so long. You have all these insights and relationships that have certainly been like this book is filled with so many interesting characters that I think you've met and developed a relationship over the course of many years.
And I've been lucky to work in business journalism, which to be honest is a much less crowded job industry than some of the other markets. Like if I were trying to cover, politics, there are a whole lot more reporters who are digging into that. Um,
That beat.
that being, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna click on some of these questions. Oh, Tiffany Laura is asking, what do you think is going to happen next and why for Instagram?
So Instagram is going to become a lot more like Facebook. The things that the founders resisted during their growth within Facebook, like the incessant notifications, the recommendation engine that tell you who to follow, um, all of that is now being baked into the product. And that's kind of at odds with how Instagram used to be. It used to be that Instagram had this, well, they still do, but Instagram has this editorial vision where they're trying to show you things that you may not already know that you want. The at Instagram account has more followers than any Kardashian. It's incredibly powerful in setting the stage in our culture and showing people Instagram's opinion about what kind of content is good. But as there's more recommendation based, uh, find searching on Instagram, you'll find yourself falling into rabbit holes of the same thing. And then I think the other thing that we're seeing change, it's not even as a result of the changes of the products. It's a result of us, how we want to share differently on Instagram right now. As we're in lockdown, we're seeing a lot more live video. We're seeing a lot more messaging. We're seeing people who don't really have the same bragging rights about vacations and Michelin star dinners because we're not out. We're not trying to pretend life is better or more perfect than it actually is. We are all in some level of crisis, some way worse than others.
Yeah,
And we're just trying to connect with one another in different ways. So you're seeing people do like live cooking tutorials, live workout tutorials. You're seeing a lot of celebrities go live from their homes. It's a very interesting dynamic on Instagram right now. The third thing is integration with Facebook behind the scenes. Facebook is trying to build a mega network of its products and make it so that if you're on Instagram or WhatsApp or Messenger or Facebook, you can access the network on any of those properties. And that's going to be a very different way to think about Facebook as the quote unquote family of apps.
right.
Um,
And like, what do you feel like that actually ends up meaning? This is a question by Ashwin too. Um, in terms of like Facebook having this like network of many different products, to be honest, like not all of which like I think people always know that Facebook owns all of them. What do you feel like that means for the regulatory environment for Facebook and for other social media apps?
so Facebook is currently under antitrust investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, and 47 state attorneys general. The longer those investigations take, the more tightly integrated Facebook will be, the more difficult it will be to call to break them up. So, and the more they can argue that these are just one product, not several, and that they are not, too much of a monopoly, that they have a lot of different services they're providing people.
Right. Huh. That's like mildly terrifying. Um, and so for you though, I mean, for all of that being scary, it has been such a rich platform that allows like lots of people to start their own businesses, right? Both Facebook and Instagram, in like both their own communities. And so, what are ways that you feel like these social media platforms can support like journalists and writing and like the freedom of speech?
Well, I think the interesting thing about Instagram, because it's this place where it's a perfect representation of you or a brand, it becomes very easy to build something that doesn't rely on the normal gatekeepers. You don't actually have to work for an organization or have an agent or be cast in something. You can just go and do it. And so I think, I've seen a lot of interesting media content coming from people who are in college or teenagers who are building news organizations within Instagram. I talked to a Brazilian fashion blogger who has become huge on Instagram just really through this app, sharing her insights in fashion development. She doesn't have to work for Vogue. She's actually more powerful on her own,
Right.
within her country. Her voice is very important. So I think that we're seeing the rules of how people build brands be completely rewritten, and that brands are becoming more like people and people are becoming more like brands, and that Instagram is facilitating that. And when I say brands are becoming more like people, I mean that brands have like this narrative and this lifestyle that they're trying to fit into, that they present on their Instagram, not just through their own Instagram pages, but through work with people who are like fitting that brand into their own content. So it's been a really interesting transition.
Yeah, totally. I think you see that with like even on Twitter too, right? Like everybody has like their own voice. And in the same way, I feel like different brands have like a very specific look, and it becomes an aspirational thing for users and customers alike. That's awesome. Um, okay, so we've got like about 3 minutes left, and so we have a handful of lightning round questions. Thank you everybody for submitting yours as well. I'll start with like, what's next for you, Sarah? Post book tour.
Wow. Post book tour. I hear that book tours are never over. You may be seeing more of me. I mean, I just still want to. I want to keep digging into these stories. I'm still working at Bloomberg and Business Week, trying to understand how our lives are changing because of these companies, and trying to figure out how the companies are dealing with the current crisis. I'm interested in digging into new things like TikTok to understand what's going on there. I, for the foreseeable future, will remain a reporter. Very curious about everyone's perspective on everything.
Amazing. Yeah, so if you have your tips about TikTok or any other new social apps, Sarah is your person to hit up. Okay, what's your favorite Instagram account? These are lightning round questions now.
Okay, I love pasta grannies. I've recommended it to so many people now. It is the best. You see these Italian grandmas making their own pasta, like they've made it for decades. It is so soothing and they're just so wonderful. And that's the kind of heartwarming content that is encouraging me to make pasta in these stay-at-home moments.
That's amazing. Oh my, that sounds so cute. Talk about a window in people's lives.
Yeah.
Coolest celebrity or influencer you've met? You've got everybody from Snoop Dogg to the Kardashians to like Silicon Valley insiders in this book. So who were you starstruck by?
I I was starstruck by Kris Jenner. Talking to her about the history of Instagram, like you just can't get that perspective from anybody else. She gave me insight into her conversations when Instagram was first catching on. She told me that her family was getting a lot of side eye from other A-listers who were saying, "Why would you ever want to build anything on Instagram? If you share photos of your life to that extent, doesn't it make you less mysterious? Wouldn't people think you were less famous?" And of course, she was proven right that this is a place where you can actually build more affinity with people who follow you and a bigger cheerleading squad around your brand. So I thought that was fascinating, and that she didn't initially believe that Kylie Jenner could pull off her lip kit. She was like,
Totally.
she was
I
like,
love
you have to pick three colors that you want to wear, because if you don't sell any of this inventory, you're gonna have to like be wearing this lipstick for the rest of your life. And she sold out within seconds.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was a wild story. And then she like, then Kylie went on to become like youngest self-made billionaire type thing from like her Instagram following.
I also love Ashton Kutcher's story of Kevin Systrom saving him from a burning ski cabin in Utah with Joshua Kushner. Like, it's
And he was like,
crazy. I I would have never read that story anywhere else unless I talked to him. So I think that yeah, there's a lot of really rich people involved in the history of Instagram. Not rich in
totally.
money in terms of rich in interestingness.
Okay, so you've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snap, and TikTok. You can only have one. Which do you choose?
Twitter. I'm a journalist. Sorry. I mean, I know that a lot of people don't need Twitter, but I need Twitter to do my job.
Fair enough. Okay, so Systrom, when he made Instagram, it was actually originally called Bourbon because he really likes his bourbon, and it was like for hipster people. What's your favorite drink?
Oh, I love mezcal. And I've been making these mezcal drinks that have like mezcal, Aperol, and dry vermouth. They're very tasty. Or my husband has been making them for me, and I've been copying the recipe because I think it's fun.
I love that. Oh, hi, Brad. Okay, so where can people find your book and find you after?
So I am at Sarah Frier on Instagram and Twitter. My book is sold everywhere that books are sold, whether it's Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Target. But I would really encourage people, if you're going to buy the book now, to buy it from an independent bookstore because those places are really hurting and they're relying on online orders to keep paying their staff. So you could do a good thing if you buy the hardcover from them. But it's also audiobook and Kindle and whatever other format.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's a great, fun, fast, informative read about something that I think most of us use and love for a number of reasons. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today, and thank you everybody else for coming online for my first proper Instagram live.
Thanks, guys.
Bye everyone.
Bye.